Do you guys remember that magical period leading up to the Switch launch? Do you remember when Nintendo dedicated an entire E3 to showing us Breath of the Wild, where they had multiple boosts decked out to look just like the game? They had hours of footage played for us, and all of it just looked amazing. I remember being blown away at the time just how big the starting plateau was. Like, it seemed the size of just your normal open world game. I watched all the E3 coverage. I consumed everything that covered it, from the Game Informer stuff, Nintendo's official channel. Never had a game look so amazing to me. The freedom and customization offered were unlike anything we had ever seen before. Link was just radically different. The world was barren but beautiful. You had these weird spider things chasing Link, and cooking looked like the coolest thing in the entire world. This game just looked breathtaking, and I ate up every single thing they showed me that weekend. Breath of the Wild to me was going to be our generation's Ocarina of Time, is at least what I thought back then. For context, for those back in 2016, we did not know what a Switch was. We all thought that this Zelda game was going to be on this awesome thing called the Wii U back then. It was going to save the console. But we all heard the rumors about the thing called the Nintendo NX, the next generation thing. It was all just rumors. But then, in the fall of 2016, Nintendo dropped that first Switch trailer. We finally got the name for it. We could finally stop calling it NX. This trailer was mind-blowing to us back then. Didn't have little kids in it. There were actual adults playing Zelda, Skyrim, and Mario. Modern music in the background. This was craziest, because for us in the Wii U era, all Nintendo was known for was these kiddie trailers. I watched that trailer at least 10 times that day. I showed it to anyone who had a remote interest that day in school. I was obsessed with the Switch up until its launch. To me, this was the future of gaming. As a hardcore Nintendo sib, I needed this. A portable home console you take anywhere with you, and can play third-party games like Skyrim. This was so crazy to me back then, especially with how dry a selection was on the Wii U for so long. I remember I also stayed up late in December to watch that big Switch games reveal. It was so weird back then, because it was like an actual live broadcast, not the pre-recorded Nintendo Direct you're so used to. Nevertheless, the games they showed just had my mind blown. Splatoon 2, a new 3D open world Mario, freaking Xenoblade 2, and then finally, the most beautiful trailer ever for Breath of the Wild. That had to be one of the greatest trailers of all time. The fantastic music swelling in the background with the action-packed visuals, where we first got our glimpse of the game's story. It was such a wild time in Nintendo back then, because we were starving for so many years. We have it so good now compared to the Wii U era. I was so ecstatic and so hyped after seeing all this stuff for the Switch. I need this in my hands to play Zelda. As I mentioned a little briefly before, I was a hardcore Nintendo fanboy during the entire Wii U era. I was that kid back then who thought Nintendo could do no wrong, that Xbox was for babies. Real gamers played on Nintendo and those classic retro games. The only problem back then was that I was 16. Due to my commitments with basketball, school, and being a kid, I didn't really have any money and no job to really earn any money for it. So the Switch was released, and I just had to watch from the sidelines. I had to watch every person review online called Breath of the Wild the greatest game of all time. Revolutionized the open world genre. I had to sit there and agonize over the fact that I couldn't play this life-changing game. People were calling it the greatest game of all time. IGN, so many other sites were giving it 10 out of 10s. Then there was I, the hardcore Nintendo simp, who had to just sit there and be devastated. I was forced to resort to hearing people talk about how great the Switch was online, how great Breath of the Wild is, and watching gameplay for hours. I wanted nothing more in my life at that moment to play Breath of the Wild on my Switch. I couldn't bring myself to even play the Wii U version, because back then the Switch was just the definitive one in my eyes. Nobody wanted the Wii U version. But for the moment, I sadly had to just resort to playing my 3DS for the time being. But then, out of nowhere that summer on vacation, my dad told me he would buy me a Switch and a few games. Granted, the circumstances were kind of weird, as my family never really spoiled me for anything. Most games and consoles I'd bought were with my own money, that were either given to me, or I earned from doing some work. I guess my dad was in a really good mood that week, as he brought my brother some Gucci slides when we were in LA the week prior. They just promised to be on their best behavior, and one of them will commit to changing schools. After hearing this, I was like, hey, you should get me something too. So I told him I wanted a Switch. To me, Nintendos are temporary, Nintendo's forever. When we got back home, we went to 3 different GameStops that day just looking for a Switch. Every place was sold out. For context back then, the Switch was actually pretty hard to find in stores during its first year. Nintendo's supply issues back then Go figure, just like Amiibo. So I finally get the Switch, and I boot up the game as soon as I can. Finally, I get to play what people say is one of the greatest games of all time. And it was everything I wished for. I played the game for a week straight that summer, put in at least 70 hours to beat my first playthrough. I loved Breath of the Wild. I tell this story because I want to give context to what I and many others thought of Breath of the Wild back in 2017. This game's hype was unreal. To us, this was the game of our generation, the usher into the modern era of Nintendo, the modern day Ocarina of Time. We were treated like the second coming of Christ back then, a game that would radically change our lives and how we view gaming as a whole. I am being serious when I say that people bought a Switch specifically for Breath of the Wild. I was one of them. This is a landmark Nintendo game that I feel really shook up the open world genre and how Nintendo approaches games. I thought that being 5 years since the game released, and the Suiko right around the corner, it's time I should go back and see if we're right to call it the GOAT back then. Today, we're going to go back and see if Breath of the Wild was as good as we said back then, or were we just overhyping and blinded by our hype. Before we can go to our analysis, I think it's important to establish the context around this game in 2017. See, there were two reasons why Breath of the Wild was such a big deal. The first most obvious being that it was part of the Legend of Zelda series, the most critically acclaimed game series out there, known for its main console entries that shook up the entire gaming landscape and established many all-time favorites for many people out there. And I am one of those people. The game that got me into gaming was Twilight Princess. I played it back on the Wii and fell in love with it instantly. The world, the characters, and gameplay, it all drew me as a kid. I couldn't stop obsessing over it. The same applies to Skyward Sword back in 2011. I am one of the rare Skyward Sword fans who loves the game wholeheartedly. Now, that's a conversation for another day, but I want to bring this up to you to show how important the series is to people. For most, this is the series that made them into gamers. The series they grew up with and had a huge formative impact on them as teens or children. Legend of Zelda is more than just a game series of people. It's a core pillar of them as a person. I know it sounds cheesy to say, but it's true. We all have those games we played at one point in our life that just changed how we approach life. For me, that was Twilight Princess. So for Nintendo to release a main console Zelda game after 6 years, it was a pretty big deal. For as we know, pretty much every mainline console game has been an instant classic. Think of Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, Link to the Past, and Twilight Princess. Each one of these is remembered as games that we'll talk about and love till we die. Breath of the Wild had a high bar set for it that needed to cross. The second reason is the state of open world games at this time. At this time, we were getting flooded with way too many open world games at this point. It's just crazy to think just how much Breath of the Wild changed how we approach the open world. And we compare most open world games before 2017 to after, it's kind of crazy. Before us, we had your Skyrims, Assassin's Creed, and Fallouts. All these games are amazing, don't get me wrong. I'll play each of these for hundreds of hours. But no game has ever said to the player, here's a blank map, go explore. In most games, you got a map full of busy work to do. Go get 100 of this random thing, or here's one of the 10 strongholds you need to do. Open world is getting pretty stale by this point, as I feel like we're getting one like every month. The genre really needed a shake-up that took it back to the roots of exploration. So much of these games tie everything behind quests and levels and cutscenes the player needs to overcome at some point. I feel like the game was pushing you heavily towards its own direction, instead of embracing the freedom of the world and allowing the player to do exactly what they want to do. So when the world found out in Breath of the Wild that you can literally go to the final boss whenever you want and beat him, it blew all of our minds back then. After the tutorial platform, you literally had all the tools you needed to go anywhere you wanted. The only thing limiting you was yourself. Any challenge or hazard in your way can be cleared if you're creative enough. I'll go more into this concept later, but it's important to know just how free the game is, and how freedom seeps into every part of it, into story and gameplay. Once you got that plateau, the world was yours to conquer. You can go wherever you wanted, whichever direction you wanted. You can go straight to Ganon, go explore the castle for a while, go to the volcanoes and just vibe there for a while, or you can just stick on the plateau for 20 hours if you really want to. There's nothing forcing you to go anywhere. This is your story, your world. The only forced quest for you is the tutorial, which is itself another mini open world for you to explore and be free on. This is also a radical change from what we have known from Zelda games. Nearly every entry besides the first one has been known for its linearity. Sure, there were parts like the sky and the Great Sea you can explore, but they were never really fleshed out to the extent of your typical open world games. More like glorified hub worlds for you to run around in. In most of the games, you're forced to go on the path and story the game wanted you to experience. There's nothing wrong with this linearity in these games. These games are masterpieces. but it's hard not to agree that the formula is getting kind of stale around this time. It really hit a breaking point after Skyward Sword, as we've gotten like 5 games in a row that followed the same formula, and Zelda needed a shakeup. So when we all found out how non-linear Breath of the Wild was, it was crazy. The game only had 4 dungeons we were told, and all of them were optional. It appeared to be heavily inspired by the original Zelda with its focus on exploration. From a Zelda and a non-Zelda fan's perspective, this game was a crazy looking refresh on the current state of gaming. I want to spend all this time building up the game to give you context on how I and many others went to Breath of the Wild. It's very important for any discussion the game takes into consideration. Breath of the Wild was a huge deal to us in 2017. It changed how we view open world games and was extremely innovative in its approaches. Have you ever noticed how different open world exploration games are nowadays? These games have been a lot less hand-holding and more open to how you approach them ever since then. For me, this is really apparent when I played through Assassin's Creed Odyssey a few years ago. It's very obvious this game took inspiration from Breath of the Wild. It has an open tutorial area with many different alternative paths to get to the end, the only linear area in the game. After that, you can go straight to the other side of the map or wherever you want. The combat is not more open ever with multiple approaches to whatever encounter. The meme towers are nearly identical to Breath of the Wild, with them now just filling your map and being a fast travel point. Breath of the Wild changed everything, which is mind-blowing to us back in 2017. So now, equipped with this context and 2022 perspective, let's see how it holds up today if it still truly lives up to the hype. I feel like before delving too much into this retrospective, we need to first talk about just how amazing the starting plateau is for this game. It was the area first shown to us back at E3 2016, and it's kind of crazy just how perfect of a starting place this is. Everything you need to know for the rest of your adventure is shown to you here. Scavenge environment or survive, shown to your first few minutes leaving the shrine with apples and branches for you to pick up. The true freedom of the world, you can pretty much do any shrine in whatever order you want, and get there however you want to. The game leaves your adventure up to you. Even how you approach combat is shown by giving players different environmental tools in the area. For example, in the cave near Temple of Time, you can shoot down a lamp to cause the TNT to explode and kill most enemies. Or one camp will have a bunch of those TNT at the bottom and you can push rocks into it. Or you can wait till nighttime and seal their weapons and then go for a bunch of sneak attacks. Or you can just say screw that and just go charging in and try to live. The choice is yours. This is your adventure and you are free to do whatever you want in it. The only time the game really stops you is here in order to explain Calamity Ganon in the world of Hyrule. But even then, you have so much freedom to explore the plateau after that. There aren't any invisible barriers or text boxes blocking you from exploring. You can just leave the opening shrine and just walk up the stony mountain. You can go jump off a cliff. Go explore the woods for an hour and find Koroks. That's just awesome that you can just have so much freedom this early on. The game specifically makes sure that every player is equipped with all the knowledge and tools needed to explore the world in this exact area. There aren't any long tutorials or text boxes. You just have to wander around and discover all the game's mechanics by yourself. The game just shows you a problem and shows a potential solution right by. There is an answer to every problem you run into this game, whether you notice it or not. This is when the game introduces runes in Sheikah Slate, which essentially replaces items for this Zelda. Plateau also provides players with a sort of testing ground for them to learn the ins and outs of the runes. Magnesis can be used to make bridges or grab sunken treasure. Stasis can be used to avoid obstacles or do some crazy crap with the kinetic force. Cryonis gives the player ways to conquer the water. And bombs are just bombs. All these runes are the bare essentials you will need to survive in Hyrule. And I really enjoy just how versatile each of these runes can be. As pretty much like you can use Magnesis to grab metal boxes, hit enemies with. Or you can use Stasis to hit it a bunch of times, stand on top of the object, and just go flying. Cryonis, you can open up little gates, or even later on, you can even use it to fight a boss. I really appreciate just how much variety and diversity each one of these runes has, and how they all have their own little niche for every situation in the game. I do wish that in the sequel, they kind of like expand more on this, and give you like maybe another 1 or 2 runes. That'd be more practical, maybe give more like combat sense, because sometimes it feels like the runes are more useful early game for combat, and they kind of fall off late game, but that's a discussion for another day. Little side story, but I remember playing this at a friend's house on his Wii U back in 2017. I remember I just spent hours just running around scavenging and slaying every bokoblin I saw on the plateau. I don't think I ever actually left that plateau, to be honest with you, but it was just so mind-blowing at times to explore this place. I saw so much of it at E3 last year. I was exploring, just going through all it blind. And honestly, that's the best way to go through this game. No guide near you, and you're just running around being led by instinct. But that's something I want to go into more later. Playing this level again years later, it still baffles me how many different approaches you can take in this section every time. For me, my preferred route is to do magnesis, bombs, stasis, and then end in the cryo shrine. But that's just my way. You can do these in any order you want. I just find the cryo one to be most climactic, so I always save it for last. Speaking of the cryo, this has to be the best part of the plateau. There's so many creative ways for you to approach this section. The best way to get through is to learn how to cook. You can cook and then give it to the old man who gives you warm doublet. Equipping this allows you to get through all the cold. Or you can just eat the dish yourself. There's plenty of spicy peppers near the entrance that you can use. One of my favorite secrets about the area actually is at the top of one of the mountains. You can find the old man waiting for you there. Talking to him surprises him and he gives you the warm doublet since he's impressed with you even exploring there. This just blew my mind on my first playthrough back then. Still does. I mean, these two methods aren't the only one you can use to get to the cold area. I bet people who will just trudge through with a torch in their hand, or they just will constantly keep eating food over and over again, or just save scumming to get up there. I can't stress enough just how perfect of this area is. It literally equips you with everything about the game. It gives you an example of the nonlinear nature, the dangers of the world, how you even go about things, how to use your things. It's just perfect in everything it does. And from just the plateau, you are equipped with every single tool you need to play the game and every single value you need. Not only that, but you also learn how to approach any situation presented to them and how much freedom the game is offered to you. It's just baffling and amazing how much you can get from just this one area in the game. For this retrospective, I'm going to do two things specifically. The first is to play through the whole game without a guide. The only tool I will use is my own memory and the hero's path from the DLC. I will not be touching the DLC in this video. I'd like to save that for a different discussion. I just want to focus on the pure experience we had in 2017. But I will be using Hero's Path just because it's an amazing tool to know and discover what areas you have not explored in Hyrule yet. And the second thing is, I'll do the dungeons in a different order than I've ever done in the past. Usually I go counterclockwise, from the Zoras and end the Gerudo Desert. I've gone through this route twice, and it's because I've never been the kind of player to just break from what's simple. I'm usually the type who sees the simple path and will go down that. For this time, I want to challenge myself and approach this game from a fresh perspective. So my route will be, I'm going to start in Kakariko, then go straight to Revali, then Gerudo, then the Zoras, and then end on Death Mountain. I've never gone this out of order when playing this game, so I want to truly feel how non-linear this game is when I do things this clearly out of the expected order. So I'm going to divide this section into two parts, what I see as the core gameplay of Breath of the Wild, which is combat and exploration. Starting off with combat, for someone coming off right after 3D Zelda games, it feels very familiar here. It's your typical Z-Lock style combat with your normal sword slashes. Comparing to its predecessors, Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword, there are obvious upgrades and some letdowns. The previous two games did a really good job of really deepening your typical button mashing combat from Ocarina. TP gave Link a variety of moves while Skyward Sword had the motion controls. This led to every counter having a wide variety of ways you can approach them. You can do the mortal draw to insta-kill them, or you can do the super jump attack, or use the Skyward Strike to first stage the enemy. In addition, Skyward Sword, each enemy felt like a puzzle they had to solve using motion controls. Unfortunately, Breath of the Wild does not care of these innovations, and goes back to a much more simpler style, like that in Ocarina of Time. This is a bad thing, as Breath of the Wild has two things going for it. First off, the new Flurry Dash is an amazing thing to have. It's a really good balance between risk versus reward. By dodging at last second, Link enters a sort of bullet time, where he can then rush the enemy and deliver a crap ton of blows. And this is always so satisfying to pull off, and really adds a high skill ceiling to the combat, especially when you get to that late game. Link also enters by using the bow in midair, which lets you fire by draining your stamina. And this mechanic adds so much to the bow, and makes jumping for your horse oh so cool. Timing a well-timed bomb arrow and setting off the camp like a badass just never gets old. Additionally, Breath of the Wild also has two other weapon types in Link Arsenal that I really enjoy, that being heavy weapons and spears. Heavy weapons can only hit a few times a combo, but can stagger and break through shields very easily, and typically do more damage with each strike. Spears can attack the fastest, but typically do the least amount of damage. However, both don't allow you to use the shield when in use, which is very frustrating at times, as the shield bash can be so important. Having that extra defense is very vital, especially with how much damage enemies do in this game. And I personally really enjoy the weapon trying we have, as it really lends the overall atmosphere of the game. You're not fighting with just swords now. Whatever you find is what you use. I find heavy weapons most fun as there's nothing like doing a big slam with them and doing that huge spin attack and just breaking through everything. It feels very refreshing to have different kinds of weapons for Link to use, because for the past we've been so used to using swords in every game. I mean, swords are cool, don't get me wrong, but it feels so much more refreshing to use these big spears and these big clubs and knock enemies around. It gives this game such a different tone versus everything else, that anything you find in the wild can be yours to fight enemies with, versus just that typical Master Sword used for the rest of the game. And now building off these new weapons, combat encounters in this game are so much more different as well. In older games, fighting 3 Dark Nuts or Lizalfos was considered such a huge challenge, but now, fighting multiple enemies is so common. But your arsenal AoE weapons make these encounters much smoother than previous games. Although, running headfirst into a camp without a good plan can still easily result in your death. Some camps have archers that will continuously fire at you while a high level enemy is pounding away through a large spear. Or there's levels to the little fortress. These different kinds of encounters and approaches really lend itself well to the overall atmosphere of the game, which is everything is just not scripted and different everywhere you go. You need to adapt based on what you have and what the enemies are, which is awesome, as it really makes you feel like a scavenger in the open world, and all the tools and the runes you have just let every combat encounter just be so much more different than the last one. I think an example of this would be a scenario like this. So you're running around as Link, and you see a Lizalfos or Bokoblin encampment, and then they set fire to the ground. You can even use that fire to go into the air, launch arrows at them, and then one-shot all of them real quick, or fire some bomb arrows down. Or another encounter is it's a lightning storm outside, and you throw a weapon into the middle of them, zaps all of them. Or it's nighttime, so you have to sneak in stealthily, steal all their weapons, and then you can fight them one-on-one. Or maybe there's a cliff nearby, so then you use the bombs just to push them off the edge. It's all these little factors like this, and the whole world that just makes every encounter, you have to really think about how you want to approach it. I mean, obviously, if you really want to, and if you're good enough, you can still run in and just smack people and use all your dodging skills, but where's the fun in that when you have so much on your plate to do? Now we need to move on to the most debated topic of this game, weapon durability. Just to start off, I love the durability system in this game. My main reason being just how it adds to the overall theme of the game, which is exploring the wilderness and taming it as your own. When you're trying to survive, it makes sense that you won't have the same weapon to use over and over again. Weapons degrade over time, get chinked, and sometimes just lost due to an enemy encounter. You need to adapt what the world throws at you, which is why Link has so many weapons he can use. Additionally, the weapons break over time forces players to have to try new things. It's the reason that players are forced to combat encounters differently every time. Sometimes your best weapon is not the sword, but your club. Knowing this, you can confidently take on larger group of enemies by using your spin. Being forced in situations like this make it feel more like you're trying to survive in this dark and wild world. Plus, I personally feel like the fragility of weapons is really overrated. Obviously, the weaker material like bones and woods are going to be fragile. Your typical metal weapons take a decent amount of time to even break. And especially on late game, weapons can last a really long time, so there's no reason to really complain by then. And if players really want to use just one weapon, the Master Sword is in the game and regenerates, meaning that players who really want to can just use that over and over and over again just to beat the game. But I will agree that sometimes weapon durability is a bit more unforgiving, especially early on. Early on, these metal weapons should not be breaking so quickly, especially with how rare swords feel in the early game. And also, there needs to be some sort of meter that shows like how much hits are left. Like if you have 20 hits, like obviously that it gets red when it's really close to breaking, but that's just not enough. But I do enjoy just how like sometimes in a combat encounter you'll be like, alright, I can't use a sword this time, so now I gotta learn how to use spears more effectively, or I gotta learn how to use your clubs more effectively. It really forces you to experiment with what the game has, or sometimes there are moments you just have no weapon, so you have to use the environment around you. Like you're fighting a really tough enemy, but your weapons are really low, or you have none, you gotta use a bunch of bombs, you got cheese right at victory. A lot of this really lends to creativity and freedom the game offers you for each combat encounter. Speaking of the Master Sword, I really love its inclusion in this game as an unlockable tool that players can use that can infinitely regenerate over time. And it's so cool just discovering it, going to the woods for the first time, seeing it sheathed there, and just stuck in awe. And seeing how you can't even you're not even ready for it just yet. It makes it such a great reward. Such a great incentive for players who do want to go away without durability. But I will say, I remember I saw an idea out there where like you start with a really weak weapon that gets stronger and stronger over time over the game, but it's still like not a permanent upgrade over like your normal weapons. I think that could be a really cool idea for the sequel. Maybe like when Link has that like hand he has in the trailer that turns into like a weapon. Kind of like how you can get upgraded runes, but you can upgrade it over time to be more of a weapon or tool in combat. If they don't want it to be just a clear weapon, it'd be cool to make it a tool that upgrades over time and becomes really, really strong by late game by doing so many shrines. I think that could be a good alternative for combat, but I think just the way it is in this game, I still really, really love the diversity that all the weapons bring. Alright, enough about combat. Let's go on the main hook of the game. Exploration. Breath of the Wild offers a humongous world filled with varying biomes and locations for players to explore. You can go to a fiery volcano, frigid mountains, or the intense desert. Every area in the game is teeming with shrines, quests, and treasure for the player to find. This is my third playthrough of the game. I'm still finding new things to do in this game. Just recently, I found a house near Fort Hateno where a guy gives you a shrine quest for a shrine I never knew about. My mind was so blown when I encountered it. There was one time, my second playthrough, a few years back, I found that hidden destroyed shrine at the back of the canyon. And it was crazy. This area with tons and tons of guardians there all waiting to fire me with this hidden shrine in the back. That was so cool to find. But the most important part of exploration in this game is the freedom you are offered. As mentioned earlier, no game has ever given the player as much freedom as Breath of the Wild does. The only thing limiting you in this game is your skills. You are given every tool you need to challenge every encounter at the Plateau. You can literally walk to Ganon and fight him with just your bombs if you really wanted to. Everything else here in the game is just extra things to make the experience more fun or easier for you. The tools you get from doing that dungeon just to help you traverse or fight enemies more easily. Progression is also not directly tied to the story unlike other games. In most open world games, you have to go through a lengthy story to get the needed tools that help you explore. By going through the story, you can unlock fast travel or key weapons or just run important characters, for example. The story is not tied or necessary to how you explore the world. It just adds scripted context what players can already see when exploring. I'll save these thoughts for now until we go more into the story. The game does kindly give players a scripted way to explore via Divine Beast if you so choose, but even the order you do these is up to you. The path you choose in this game is all up to you. Do you want to go down the scripted path or forge your own? Do you want to go down what the game has laid out for you? Or make up your own story if you really want to? The choice is yours, and it's crazy how overwhelming this can feel at times, but can still feel so infectious that this is your world to conquer. You can do whatever you want. The only thing limiting you here is yourself. Let's talk about how we explore the world. Your main way of exploring the world is by either just walking, climbing, or gliding to wherever you want to go. Link can literally climb anything in this game, which means any mountain you see can be conquered. The limitation to your climb is your skill and how much stamina you have. A smart player can use a little alcoves and nearly even ground on a mountain to climb with only 1 bar of stamina. It is a huge pain in the butt to do, but you can do it. When you get to the top, you can just glide down and travel even further. The glider is honestly the best part of traversal, and I can't imagine this game without it. The game rewards you for climbing everything, with the ability to quickly traverse the world right after. It also means you can climb anything without ever having to worry about the climb down. This makes finding towers so worth it. You can scan the environment, mark something like a shrine, and just glide over right quickly. But your primary way of moving around is just walking. For some reason, I never really got sick of all the running. Maybe it's because the stamina will regenerate so fast, but it's not really been an issue with how much you do it. You use horses to get around, but it's been annoying since you can't take them to certain areas and their call range is so short. Side note, why can't you just call your horse wherever, like in Twilight Princess? I know it'd break immersion, but it's so annoying to have to go back to the stable every time to get your horse. It's even worse when you have to dismount so often just to explore. So having a horse is more of like an annoyance at times, rather than the benefit it should be. Sure, this issue is somehow fixed in the DLC with the motorcycle you get. That's not in the main game, and it comes so late in the adventure anyways. I do think it's pretty cool how personalized your horse can be in this game. Because obviously in all the previous games, horses are just like the one character. But it's nice that you can have your own little horse to tell your own story. Like, oh, this pink horse is the one I took down Ganon with. Or this pink horse is the one I took everywhere to the volcanoes with me. I think it's really cool. Although I will say, it's kind of annoying how like some of the quest horses will have much better stats than like the wild ones. Which is a little annoying, but I mean, it's just an option. You don't have to use them, but so I won't really complain about that too much. Just to build off the idea of exploring this game, you have so little tools to explore, but it gives you so much variety in how you can approach any obstacle in your path. Any mountain can be climbed, any gorge can be gone down, anything can be cleared, you can go anywhere. There's nothing to stop you, you don't need an item, you don't need a hook shot to get over somewhere to get to an area. Wherever you can go, you can walk there. You can glide there. You can ride there. It's all up to you. You have all the tools, and the game gives you the option to go do it. We talked a lot about exploration, but what can you find in this world? The two main things are shrines and Korok seeds. Shrines are basically mini dungeons spread all over the world for the player to find. Some are hidden, or some are just in plain sight for you to discover. The joy of finding one is unmatched in this game. Finding one means you get a new fast travel location, treasure, and usually a unique challenge alongside it. Beating one means you get rewarded spirit orbs, like they may exchange for more stamina or hearts. This is an amazing reward for going underway, as it means you can survive even longer out in the wilderness. The main purpose of these shrines to me is to replace the traditional dungeon system from previous Zeldas with these more bite-sized challenges. First off, I really enjoy the shrine system in this game and the challenges they present the player. Some have you do a mini dungeon side of it where you have to complete a challenge or puzzle in order to claim the orb. These get pretty cool and force players to think outside the box, as well as deepen the rune system as well. Some of my personal favorites include the Ice Cube challenge and any shrine involving fire in general. The Ice Cube shrine has you take an ice cube past a series of flamethrowers in order to bring it to the stage. I really enjoy as it forces the player to think outside the box and navigate around this ordeal. There's one point where you get to put the metal box, you gotta hold it up to stop the flamethrowers, but you gotta find a way to get the ice through it. So you gotta think about it, and I realized if I just use stasis, and I bumped it a bunch of times, it can go right under real smoothly. And that's just a really cool situation using these two runes together like that. I also enjoy any shrine that involves fire as well. I feel like fire is really underused in this game, and it's really fun to solve puzzles with it by like burning bush, or to take down a gate or something like that. I also enjoy any shrines that has you navigate an object Cryonis in them, such as that large orbs on a river or the waterfall at the beginning of the game. I feel like Cryonis is criminally underdeveloped in this game, and I wish the sequel expands mechanics a lot more, maybe give it more shapes to do in the water or something like that. While some shrines also have you doing a quest outside of it to get access to it, and these have to be my favorite ones most of the time. They usually have you doing some cool challenge or solve some riddle in order to get access to them. Some even require you to talk to a person or cast in order to get hints on how you access a shrine. Cast will give you a riddle through a song, and you got to figure it out, like, oh, you have to shoot the bow, the arrows through this area, or stand at a certain location at a certain time. This is really fun to solve. I do think some of these riddles can be cool, but also some can be extremely confusing or too simple, such as what I just mentioned with the rocks. But I do really enjoy them most of the time. And I found that they're able to be much more creative with their approach when compared to traditional shrines. They're able to work with the entire world rather than just this fixed environment like this. Some of my highlights of these have to be some of the Korok challenges in the Hidden Forest. Except the more you follow that Korok. That one can be really annoying and really frustrating at times. And you also get cool quests like showing a crazy girl pictures of a guardian, which is very interesting. Or the shrine where you have to do a sand seal time trial. I love using sand seals, so I really enjoyed this one. Not all shrines are puzzles though, but rather combat challenges as well. I know this may be a hot take, but I've always slightly enjoyed these a lot. They range in 3 difficulty levels, but they also have special gimmicks inside them. Some of them fire the circular laser that requires you to use the wind generated, or to come down and slam down on top of them. And all of them do this charge attack that forces the fighter to block by using stone pillars or Cryonis, or using magnesis to raise up a metal pillar real quick. But then they all end up firing a bunch of lasers at the end that can be bounced back with a well-timed shield bash. I personally like to use these to practice my shield bashing early on, but I do know these encounters can get pretty repetitive, but I never really minded this. That's probably due to me loving the combat so much in this game. But even though I did say I liked it, there are way too many of them. The only time they really feel annoying is when you find a real minor or moderate challenge shrine when you're way beyond that level late in the game. It's like you just beat it so easily, and it just kind of feels like it's a waste of time. I do wish like the sequel just expands on these combat shrines, have a little less, but give it more variety, like having some more unique guardians. Like, it's cool how some of those shrines have different ways to combat the charge attack, but I feel like there needs to be more for having so many of them in this game. But as they are now, I think these combat challenges are fine, but they can definitely be a lot better. While a good majority of the shrines are satisfying to conquer and solve, some can just be kind of annoying or just a little too simple to solve. Like I mentioned earlier in the video about the one with the constellations, I think it's a really cool idea, but just way too confusing. And there's some shrines that you can just beat in like 10 seconds, which is just like, come on guys, we can't be doing this. As I mentioned, the combat shrines, there's too many of them. I think a good 2/3 or half of the shrines are really, really fun. But I still think there's a lot of room improvement for the sequel can do. I think you can replace like some of these easier combat shrines with much better challenges, for example. But despite these gripes, I still think shrines are an awesome addition to the world Breath of the Wild. They're really satisfying more than enough to justify their existence. Korok seeds, on the other hand, are a different story for me. To start off, I've personally never gone after all 999. I usually end up with about 100-ish, 200-ish by the end of my playthroughs, The reason I don't do this is because there are just way too many of them for no good reason. Obviously you have the use to expand your small inventory, which is a huge benefit, but it kind of caps off after a bit. Some of them do have puzzles, which is cool, like shooting the balloons, racing through goals, or going down like to find the little guys to run over. But again, there's just way too many of them, and some of them just get kind of annoying after a while, and doesn't really warrant all the effort needed to collect so many of them. It's more fun to do all the shrines, because the rewards and puzzles are way more worth it. I do think Hetsu is cute, all the Koraks are fun. I like it when you pick up a rock and you find him, and you drop it, and make a little cute little dance. I do like Hetsu's little dance to get when you upgrade, and getting more inventory slots is very nice, especially in the early game, when you need so many more weapons that you need to have on you all the time, like a Korak leaf, for example. So it's a decent reward. I just think it can be definitely more rewarding, and definitely more expanded on. It's cool to have things in your open world, but there's a large difference between fluff content like this and trinkets versus something substantial and fun like shrines. The last thing I want to talk about is side quests in this game. I honestly don't have much to say concerning this topic. I do really enjoy the shrine quests as mentioned before, and I feel like they're usually the best side quests in the game. The rewards from them are much more useful obviously and varied to the player, while also presenting unique challenges to overcome. Some shrines can give you cool armor, which is really nice, like climbing gear or the barbarian gear. Also, on the flip side, I find most side quests to be kind of dull in comparison. I think the characters in this game are funny, and I enjoy interacting with them on quests. Like there's one quest in a Hateno town where you get like 100 crickets for this guy, because the girl made a joke about eating it. I enjoy little stuff like that. Or at one of like the Heart Pond, where you're trying to like connect this Gerudo and this random guy. I really enjoy those, but the problem with these side quests is a lot of rewards are just kind of awful. You kind of just get rupees, and it's kind of a crappy reward in this game when it's really easy to earn a ton of rupees by just mining. The better quests in this game are the ones that give you unique rewards, like the one that gives you Zelda's horse, or some armor sets. I enjoyed hunting for lizards in order to get the fireproof armor and death mount. It's my go-to side quest whenever I'm in the area. More side quests need these rewards or be worth the hassle in the first place, instead of just being ignored. I feel like this is why the Terry Town side quest is the best in the game. You spend a lot of time in rupees, but you get access to a house to store items and brag about. Side note, there needs to be a better storage system to Sukul. It's annoying to be given these unique weapons built by the champions, but they're too rare to be used, but also just eat up precious inventory space as well for a while. Store items shouldn't be locked behind a 3,000 rupee paywall. Anyways, back to Terrytown. You're also given great rewards for doing this quest with the amazing shops in Terrytown. I'm a sucker for also seeing things grow over time, and always make time line for this side quest. I think the Hail Terrytown with the marriage side quest, that's always just kind of funny to me, and I just enjoy it. To me, this is the ideal side quest in this game, what a sequel does more with. I love this world and want to interact with people, but the reward needs to match up with the effort and be unique rather than repetitive. A key thing I enjoy is how the game approaches difficulty. The world over time will scale to how much you have done in it. The more enemies you defeat and the more time you spend in it, the harder the enemies you encounter. The harder enemies usually drop better weapons as a result, which then means you can approach them even more well equipped. This means going back to old areas is still challenging. It's not 4 HP bokoblins anymore, but the gigantic 720 HP ones that also drop gems. This then means that no matter where you are, how far you have gone, the game will adapt to you just like how you adapt to it. The obvious exceptions being Guardians, who just start out with a static, huge health bar, who are also the most terrifying thing in the world, especially early on. At the beginning, you don't know how much time you have to do your shield bash, or how enough hearts to even survive a single blast for them. And it really hammers on how much of a threat these creatures are and how destructive they are, which then makes it so rewarding late game where you can just charge right through them. Also, their music is the most terrifying thing to hear when you're just walking around. I remember being stuck at the entrance of Death Mount for nearly an hour just trying to find a way to get past the full power Guardian hovering its entrance. That thing was such a pain. And also shouts to the Guardian at the Plateau as hovering the bomb shrine. Just trying to get past it. I remember I kept shooting arrows and arrows into it over and over to get the stun, just so I can get a few hits off with the sword. I think I cleared it after quite a while, but oof, I never want to relive that memory again. Breath of the Wild does have a simple progression style where the numbers get bigger, but the payoff is just that the game then scales with your skill level also. This is something I noticed when playing Mario Odyssey way back, but in both games, the core tools you have from beginning to end don't really change. Sure, you can get temporary power-ups, but the runes you have and the combat will always remain the same. What separates you from the beginning of the game to the end is how well you know the world and Link. As mentioned previously, Guardians are terrifying, not just through their stats, but how they usually need to be conquered with a shield bash. Once you as a player learn how to properly time it, you can breeze right through Guardians like it's nothing. The feeling of killing your first Guardian with this technique is unmatched as a testament to your skills as a player, and that you are ready to conquer the world. Sure, there are tools to just one-shot or humiliate Guardians. The most reliable and accessible technique is the skills which you can use right from the Plateau. This is just awesome as the game rewards the player for spending time honing your skill set rather than just going for the big numbers. I mean, you could still go for the big number approach if you want with the Master Sword, as that just shreds through them with such force. But it now requires you to get up close to Guardian, which is a lot harder to do when there are multiple of them trying to swarm you. The only form of real number progression we get is via the armor system. First off, I love all different sets of armor Link can wear in the game. Changing your armor to adapt to the situation just does so much to enrich any environment you're in. I love seeing Link in different outfits and make it seem like he's adapted to the wild world around him. Plus, it's a nice change of pace. I've already seen him in the same outfit for more than 30 years at this point. But back to progression. You are able to upgrade armor permanently via the great fairies you find throughout the world. Upgrade them makes Link more tanky or provides set bonuses such as freezing immunity. The defense buffs, at least to me, feel pretty minor. I still feel like Guardians do 10 hearts a hit unless I have a specific anti-Guardian armor on. I wish upgrades instead added more than just a flat upgrade in numbers. Unlocking new abilities or attacks would make a much better incentive to do it. But overall, I don't have a problem with the current system, and glad they brought crafting over from Skyward Sword. I just hope the sequel gives us more to do with it. But seeing Link go from naked to being decked out in weapons and armor is amazing to watch over time. I especially love when you can finally get like the old outfit and put it on, and you feel like you're that Link again. I mean, we've had armor in past games like the Jazora variant, but never the extent to this, which I really appreciate. When it comes to skill-based approach to progression, just having bigger numbers does not guarantee you win a fight. Fighting a bunch of Lizalfos does not keep you safe from getting knocked off a cliff to your death, or being gunned down by a bunch of archers or guardians. You need to be creative and smart with decisions from beginning to end. This can be applied to Flurry Dash as well, which you get from the beginning of the game. Being able to continuously use the dash makes combat so much easier once you get the hang of it. But even so, pulling this off with arrows flying at you and enemies surrounding you can be tough since the window can be so narrow for some attacks. Even though you get better armor and hearts, Lynels and Bokoblins can still tear right through with a few hits if you are not careful. I do think the game does a good job of balancing skills and numbers. Having good skill means you can fight Ganon right away, but the numbers will make it difficult for you. The key thing is, that it's still possible. Higher numbers makes things easier, but the most reliable way for you as a player to progress is through your sheer skill. This is what makes Breath of the Wild such a refreshing game in 2017. Most open world games had simple ways to explore the world, but numbers kept you from going too crazy. Like in Skyrim, high level bandits or dragons can gatekeep you from doing certain quests in areas mostly the number gap between you. Sure, you can progress, but it'll take way too much time and effort to be rewarding. The weapon they drop probably won't help you with the next encounter like in Breath of the Wild, because it's probably just going to break soon. But you still can technically brute force your way through the game. See, one of the issues with Breath of the Wild is you can pretty much stack up an unlimited amount of fairies. Or you also have Mipha's Grace later on, which can revive you with plenty of hearts. And if you stockpile enough fairies, you can pretty much get through anything. In addition, be able to eat as much food as you want. If you just do a little bit of preparation before anything, you probably won't die once you get past that mid-late game. I mean, obviously the game is much harder early on, but I wish there's more consequences to using all these fairies and food in a sequel, because this just kind of takes away a lot of the tension. It just makes combat sometimes feel just more annoying. It really takes away from the tension. But regardless of this is still optional. You don't have to stockpile all these things. You can make the game harder for you if you really want to. It's kind of amazing how the idea of freedom just bleeds into every aspect of the game, even how the built-in difficulty this is. Progression, gameplay, even the story all embody this concept. This is your game and your world. You can do whatever you want. It's the ultimate sandbox experience for all kinds of players. While I am praising these ideas on paper, I do have one gripe with progression, and that concerns the champion abilities you get. As you know, you get abilities from defeating every single divine beast, and I personally think these abilities are way too overpowered for this game's world. Each one breaks the game in some sort of way that kind of trivializes what should be harder content. Sure, you can turn it off at any time, but most players are not going to do that. I personally feel like Mipha's, Daruk's, and Urbosa's abilities just break the combat of this game when they're active or usable, which is most of the time. Urbosa's Fury takes away the challenge of these group encounters, and you can simply do a spin attack and stun, and only one-shot every enemy at a huge radius. Daruk's Protection takes away the need for shield bashing, and makes guardians or basic enemies laughably easy to take care of. You just have to stand there, and they'll just deflect right back. Congrats, you get 4 free shield bashes without having to do anything. It really takes away the skill of the combat. And Mipha's Grace gives you a guaranteed super revive every 20 minutes. Having these broken abilities for combat, even just one of them, can trivialize parts of the game, especially combined with how easy it is to stockpile on food and fairies. These aspects can trivialize combat by just giving you access to so much healing and power at any time you want. These aspects can trivialize combat, but sometimes feel essential since enemies can do so much damage to Link with every attack. By mid or late game, enemies usually do about 6 hearts of health per attack, which is quite a lot, and that's sometimes not even compared to like what Lionels do, for example. Lionels can sometimes hit you for like all 20 of your hearts, which is absurd. But I don't mind the damage, just low damage is a huge problem in previous Zeldas. We had like 15 hearts and each attack does 1 heart. If attack did 2 hearts of damage, that was considered a big deal. I just think the safety net the game gives the player with all these tools needs to be reduced substantially in order to create real danger and consequences as well for the player late game. Now, I didn't really go into Rivali's Gale, but my only opinion on that is I really like it just because like sometimes you really don't want to climb all the time. Climbing takes a while, and sometimes it's nice to just have that little thing to get you up really, really high, especially like the middle of combat or something. But again, it does kind of trivialize and kind of take away from climbing when like you see a cliff face, like, oh, I'll just press Rivali's Gale. What's the point in climbing? But it's still another aspect, like, what doesn't trivialize combat, it does make exploring a lot more simpler. But despite these major gripes, I still really enjoy the progression of this game. That period from getting off the plateau to fighting Ganon at full strength is the best part of the game, to be honest. That journey from fragile hero to unstoppable threat is satisfying to watch as a player, as you spent so long exploring and fighting to get there. I just wish these abilities were more balanced out in the sequel, and Link is not this overpowered god that can go through everything. The best part of Breath of the Wild is you're just barely scraping by. You're barely getting through these encounters with just your skill and wits. That's Breath of the Wild at its core. The plateau gameplay is some of the best part of the game due to this. I just wish that that aspect could carry over the entire game, rather than just that early game aspect. I feel like this goes without saying, but Breath of the Wild is a beautiful game in all aspects. The music, art, sound, graphics just all come together to form this immaculate and calming vibe. Sure, you can nitpick small things, especially since it's on Switch. I doubt there's anyone out there whose jaw didn't drop when the title dropped in the intro. The scope of the adventure and how there's no fog makes this world seem massive. From the top of a mountain, you can see most of Hyrule without anything inhibiting your view. You can see the castle of Ganon engulfing it, or the divine beast overlooking the world from nearly everywhere you go. Breath of the Wild goes for this cel-shaded and realistic look. It takes assets from previous Zelda games and kind of mash it into its own. It has that realism of Twilight Princess, but the cel-shading from Wind Waker, but it doesn't go fully into the cartoony looks of Skyward Sword. It sort of formed its own rough and own thing that allows the world to really express itself. Link has so many expressions you can make depending on the circumstances. In the cold, his face and his hands will be red and shivering if you don't have any resistance on. You can see a joy in his face whenever you cook something. You can have him take selfies too and be super goofy. This and his ragdoll physics make just watching Link move around the world so much fun. The game also has this gritty and ancient feel too, especially with the Guardians. Everywhere you look, ruins are so common throughout and remind you of the tragedy that occurred so long ago. This is one of the best parts of the presentation, how the game shows us what happened instead of telling. Sure, you can watch a cutscene showing Hyrule being destroyed, but you don't really need that. Simply looking around you tells you this. Some of the game is showing its freedom, but I'll go more into that later. Walking around these ruined towns and seeing these corpses lying around reminds you of the catastrophe that took place 100 years ago. And this is the danger that Calamity Ganon still presents to the world now. I also love how expressive and goofy some of the common enemies look. Watch Macabre startle awake and just dive right at you, jump in there with their arms flying. Lizalfos move so riggedly like super caffeinated robots. It's so much fun. Or the Moblins who move around these lumbering giants will pick up whatever they can just to hit you with it. How the weapons become so much bigger in their hands. Sometimes they'll even throw their own allies at you. This liveliness is so great, especially in contrast them to the guardians and bosses of the game. They move with such calculated precision, with no heed to other distractions. They crawl towards you with such confidence and speed that really catches you off guard. Their robotic nature, compared to how lively everything else in this world is, just makes you feel like these things are unnatural and need to get rid of now. And don't get me started on the Guardian theme. When you hear that play, I feel like any player immediately just wants to pee their pants in fear. It's so uncomfortable sounding, especially when like all the music in the game is just natural music you find in our real world. But this robotic, uncomfortable sounding thing just makes you just send shivers down your spine and just makes you want to leave and get rid of this threat immediately. Just to be upfront, I am not much of a music critic. I just kind of enjoy listening to it with my head empty 95% of the time. I sort of let my emotions and mood dictate how I feel about a song mostly. What I will say is that Breath of the Wild has an amazing soundtrack. The weird part is I never really see anybody talk about it all the time when the game is brought up in any conversation. This is so weird as songs such as Terry Town and the main theme are up there with some of the best music in the franchise. Just a quick side note, the main theme never fails to give me chills when it plays. That drop in the middle lead, this epic build just makes me think, wow, this is a game I played? And side note over. But even weirder songs like Guardian theme pop up in memes all the time as well. But yet, I don't see as much acclaim for it as all the other games, like your Ocarinas and Twilight Princesses. I kind of feel like the main reason being is that the overall score is more meant to immerse you than entertain you. I would best describe it as lo-fi beats to listen to while studying or doing work. It's kind of a weird comparison, but this is the kind of music people listen to, or that I listen to, that puts you in a sort of trance or focused mood after listening to it for a while. It's a weird feeling to describe, but anyone that listens to this type of music while studying can relate. I encourage anyone to pull up a Breath of the Wild relaxing music compilation while working, and you'll see what I mean. I believe this because a lot of music in the game isn't as bombastic like previous Zeldas, but more relaxed and quiet. Like, let's compare the Hyrule field themes in Twilight Princess this game. When you ride around in Twilight Princess, the loud horns of orchestra pound together while you blaze around Epona, slaying enemies. While in Breath of the Wild, it's a simple space-up piano melody with no accompanying instrument. Sure, the Ryan version speed this up with a violin accompaniment, but it's still relatively simple. My guess for this drastic change is the change in focus for Breath of the Wild. Previous Zeldas, the focus of the game was going on this bombastic adventure, fighting huge bosses, saving the world, and going on an epic journey to save all of Hyrule. While Breath of the Wild has the same stakes, the focus of the game is on exploring and just immersing yourself into Hyrule, rather than the epic journey itself that Link has to go on. In simple terms, less epic, more immersion. But even though I talk about how calming the music can be, Breath of the Wild can still turn out to produce some absolute bangers that get your heart racing. The boss music of the game is especially phenomenal. I love the Calamity Ganon themes. The constant drums and opera beating make these creatures seem like terrifying monsters, and that eerie sound that plays between each chorus makes you uncomfortable, like this thing does not belong in our world. And the classic Ganon theme in the background of Twilight Princess just gives me chills as a huge fan of that game. And I enjoy how every boss has a unique version that uses their local instruments in it, like the accordion for wind blade or the piano for water blade. It's just a great way to make each boss feel distinct. As I mentioned, that main theme, man. Oh my gosh. What a way just to like make your mouth just drop. And just think, holy moly, look at this world. And there's also shout out to the trailer music that I mentioned earlier in the video. That's also a big banger. There's a big reason why it was in Smash Bros. I was generally taken aback by how much I enjoyed listening to Breath of the Wild in my free time while working on other things. For years, my general thoughts were the OST, besides Terry Town, the main theme, were alright and not the most memorable. But now I disagree. Now I feel like I have more understanding of what it was trying to do. We don't need bombastic music for a game where most of our time is just riding around the world or climbing mountains. What we needed was atmospheric or vibe music. Let's immerse ourselves, complete focus on the real star of this game, which is the world of Hyrule. Breath of the Wild's story is a weird topic to talk about. The most important part of the game's story is that it's all optional. You don't need to review every cutscene or every divine beast. How you approach this is up to you. As mentioned and is commonly known, you can begin without ever having engaged with the story at all. So look at the story and you understand how it enriches the world and as you explore it. The best story that gives you is what is untold, in my opinion. Walking through ruined towns or seeing the guardian corpses lair the land explains to us what happened. This is a world that was completely wrecked years ago and is barely hanging on. There are more monsters than people now, and certain areas are just uninhabitable. Hyrule Castle and the surrounding area are terrifying hellscapes with guardians and ruins scattered about. You can't get closer without a guardian hunting you down with this beam of death. Everywhere you go in the world, you will find a guardian that reminds you, the player, of the disaster that hit every part of it. I do have one criticism of the world though, and it's that certain areas are too peaceful or safe in my opinion. You'd think that an apocalypse event would affect these villages more, but it's clear they kinda haven't. Maybe it's because of how much they rebuilt it, but I wish the game showed more of the last impacts Calamity Ganon we enter areas. Places like Kakariko Village feel completely unaffected by the outside world, which is weird as you just passed a guardian graveyard to get there. Then there's Zora's Domain that reminds you of what the person they lost, and the direct danger Ganon poses them. You need to urgently save the Zora, or even more, disaster will strike via flood. But then you go to Death Mountain, the only problem is that they can't get more rocks? Like, what the heck, man? Saving them feels more like getting rid of a minor inconvenience rather than preventing a huge disaster. It's these aspects I wish the game put more emphasis on. Certain areas greatly hide the threat of Ganon, but others seem to just not care. The threat of Calamity Ganon should be a constant reminder to the people of Hyrule, and not a minor convenience at times. Alright, now let's get to the main meat of this. I want to do a quick rank of these areas and all my thoughts of them. As mentioned earlier, I did these areas in a different method than what I usually do. My order for this playthrough was Revali, Urbosa, Mipha, and ending with Daruk. My usual path in my past playthroughs was start at Mipha, go counterclockwise, then end on Urbosa. To me, this always felt like the clearly intended method the game wants you to do, as evident by the difficulty of these areas, especially how close Zora's domain is at Kakariko. My least favorite has to be Revali in the Rito Village. I personally feel like Revali is the least interesting of the four, and offers the least amount to the player from a story perspective at least. All this cutscene just have him being an asshole dude that offers no real glimpse or depth to his character. Additionally, he doesn't represent anything strong in Rito Village, as there aren't any ancestor connections to who you interact with. His only real story is that he learns to respect you after a little bit. Okay? I also found the air battle for the Divine Beast to be a snooze fest, as the laser attacks were super easy to dodge, and really nothing else being thrown at you. It's kind of surprising they built up this thing of being this gigantic air fortress, but just fires like one laser at a time, and like one guardian laser is really easy to dodge. The dungeon was pretty cool though. I really enjoyed how the tilting of the beast and a boss forces you to use arrows mostly, which is a really big departure from like most of the bosses that kind of require you to have to use a bunch of sword attacks, dodging, etc, etc. But still, this doesn't really save my overall experience. Tebo is cool, and I really like the bromance him and Link share, and it's also fun to hang out with this grizzled warrior taking on this big, awesome boss together. But it's kind of a shame since Rito Village is my favorite place to visit, and it's probably one of the coolest areas to explore too. There's a lot of cool secrets in the mountains, a lot of enemies to fight, and it just sucks that it's so underdeveloped, at least from this little story we see. Compared to like all the other Divine Beasts I'm going to be talking about, they do a really good job of making you feel at least a little bit involved in the community there. Third place goes to Death Mountain Daruk. This used to be my least favorite section, but mine changed upon my most recent playthrough. I always found Daruk to be very underrated, as he's the basic strong guy, just talk about how strong he is in the cutscenes. He doesn't really have any really story. This and his weak connection to Goron Village led me to really not caring about the place much, plus the annoying escort mission you do did not make this a positive experience for me. I did enjoy the journey to the Goron Village a lot though. You can be smart with your elixirs and battle 2 guardians along the way, and there's a little cool side quest where you get the fireproof gear in the middle. And my first time seeing these 2 guardians made me pee my pants back in the day, not gonna lie. That was really my first time ever conquering a guardian on my own. This and finally those Awful's Fort made Death Mountain just a lot of fun for me. I really enjoyed it when it was a gameplay perspective from this part, but for the rest of it, not as much. I found the dungeon to be kind of boring, as I felt like it was just Revali, but less creative, as it only goes on 2 angles, and you can't use your glider as much in creative ways. The boss is alright though, but a bit easy, because it does a typical vacuum that every Zelda fire boss does in the fire area. I just wish they would kind of change it up a little bit after like 30 years. What really saved this area for me was the final cutscene where Yunobo sees Daruk's spirit. Seeing Yunobo smile and be motivated by his ancestor Daruk was what really saved the story for me, and something I wish the other areas did more of. These are legendary leaders and figures who inspire their people, and it's a shame we see so little of what they mean in these villages in some of them. But that little interaction between the two really melted my cold heart. Second place goes to Urbosa in the Gerudo Desert. I always enjoyed this section of the game, and it has a lot to do with how creative the game gets here. First off, just getting to Gerudo Town is a unique challenge in itself. This part reminds me of navigating the cold section of Plateau, where we have plenty of options to complete it. You can try to navigate there only at night, since the temperature can be so low you can use your cold gear. Or you can follow a cloud and find some way to stay in the shade. Or you can just make yourself a nice cold meal. Or you could just truck it. All are great options to get yourself to Gerudo Town. And the best part is how you have to cross-dress to get it, which is always really funny to me, especially a cutscene with the guy on the building. I really enjoyed this build-up as it presents you with unique challenges you don't really find in any of the areas. I also enjoy Riju a lot, as you can see the direct connection she has to Urbosa, and it's also clear that she's struggling to fill in Urbosa's shoes, and it's putting a lot of weight on her young shoulders. I love how it's shown with the Thunder Helm barely fitting on her. You really feel Urbosa's connection impact on this place. The Divine Beast gets closer and closer to town, ready to destroy it. It's a connection and urgency that Death Mountain lacked that makes this part so strong. Additionally, you get to do a cool stealth section in Yiga Hideout with a fun little boss battle. I always really enjoy this section that forces the player to think outside the box, as you can't really go guns blazing against these really tough guys. I've tried it, it's not worth it. And top it all off, the encounter with Divine Beast is so much fun. You're cruising on sand seals while dodging the lightning and the beast's feet in order to bring it down to its knees, and the music and fast-paced section really elevates it. And to top it off, the dungeon itself is a unique function, the best of all 4 in my opinion. The cylinder you control allows the player to be really creative in their approach, offers a lot of cool solutions. The boss itself is all pretty fun. It tests your dodging skills, something not many bosses do. And it's really smaller, so it feels more like a personal one-on-one as well. But I don't like the metal pillar section of this fight, as it took me really long to figure it out. Maybe I did. I think I did figure it out. And I bring the metal pillar, and then nothing really happened. I just spent a long time just running around confused until it accidentally happened. I'm all for these kind of sections of boss fights, but it needs to be more clear to a player, or at least happen quicker for what should be done. I also find our boss to be one of the more developed and more interesting characters. Her interaction, dialogue, and cutscenes really show you on what makes her a good leader of the Gerudo. I also enjoy how she has a clear mother relation to Zelda in the cutscenes. She's really trying to fill in that void of her not really having that good parental or motherly figure in her life, which I really enjoy. All of these factors make going through Gerudo Desert a blast and definitely a highlight of any playthrough. And first place has to go to Mipha and Zora's Domain. But to be honest, this is more of a personal preference and could be replaced with Gerudo Desert depending on my mood. But I feel like this section does everything right for an optional story in this game. It has a fun intro with you fighting through hordes of Lizalfos while Sidon cheers you on. I always love this part, and it's what really made me a big fan of his. Plus, there's optional lore that really highlights the history of the Zora along the way. Secondly, the threat is very clear and immediate to the player. Ruta's endless reign will kill everyone if action is not taken. This is something that's always surprised me with the other Divine Beasts. They don't pose as much of an immediate threat. Sure, in Gerudo there were worries the Divine Beast was going to hit the town, but nothing really happens, and that's just worries. But in Zora's Domain, the constant downpour is a clear sign of the danger Ruta presents, if not dealt with. I love this, and it makes Link's presence really matter in the area. Additionally, there's a clear and meaningful connection between Mipha and the Zora. Many of the Zora are bitter towards Link, and it's clear her death is still being felt in the community years later. Initially, the King's Advisor loathes you for being responsible for Mipha's death, and so do some of the other elders in the village. All these factors lead Zora's Domain to feel more alive, and a clear connection established between the world and Link here. You also get Zora armor, and I love how there's little plot snippets behind it. I really enjoy it, something I wish the other areas did more of. When you're exploring these areas, you're most likely wearing unique armor for the climate, so why not give it story significance? It makes receiving the Zora armor and Gerudo outfit have a real meaning and incentive to wear regularly. Plus, Sidon is just a joy to have around. His optimism and his constant smile makes him such a fun character that can melt anyone's heart. This build up beforehand makes riding around with Sidon fighting Gerudo together with him such a great time. With the music slaring, knowing you're alongside your best friend like that, dodging all the ice blocks, and shooting electric arrows just in time, and Sidon saving you just in the nick of time. Such a great sequence I'll always remember when I think about this section. The dungeon itself was alright by Breath of the Wild standards. I really enjoyed manipulating the trunk to solve different puzzles, but I feel like it wasn't as pushed like in other places. The boss itself was really fun though. At least for the first part. Dodging that giant spear and going ham was such a good feeling. The second is also enjoyable. It's not clear how to knock him down. I just learned on my third playthrough how to knock him down. For the longest time, I was just using arrows, which is kind of sad to think about. And to top off this amazing section, Mipha is such a cute and interesting character. She had real weight in Zora's Domain. You can really feel it. And the genuine connection with Link she had just is the icing on the top. I also really enjoyed her giving advice to Zelda in one of the cutscenes. It showed just how much of a protector she really was. Ruta and Zora's Domain just fill in all the checkboxes I really expect out of these areas, which is just a really fun side characters to play around with, a really interesting lore on the champion, and really feeling the connection to the world, and presenting a clear and dangerous threat that really pushes you as a player to want to solve and fix this place. So yeah, that's all Divine Beast ranked, and I feel like it's the closest we get to a main story campaign in this game. It's a very unique approach that I feel has its own clear strengths and weaknesses. For one, it felt great to get directly involved with the communities of the world. In most Zelda games, the residents of a town don't really matter as much. Sure, there's some story events that happen, like in Kakariko Village and Twilight Princess, where you get a real connection there, but usually there's NPC the player feels real no connection to. But having important characters as champions makes you really care and want to save the world. It's a nice touch, as most Zelda games are more about your personal story rather than the world's, which I enjoy here. Secondly, I enjoy the non-linear structure you can tackle each section. There are no items or obstacles that stops you from going to each place directly from the plateau. You need to use your own skills and ingenuity to overcome each place's obstacles and access that quest. Plus, the blessings you receive from each place are really powerful and really give you a lot of incentive to finish it. I think developers did a great job making each area feel distinct enough that the repeated story structure doesn't really get stale. But now here's where we get negative. First off, each area is not balanced enough to support the freedom Nintendo advertised here. For example, I started off going to the retail first in Rivali, because I've never done that before. The problem was that the enemies here were way too tough for my 5 hearts and my weak weapons. The enemies had weapons and health more equal to mid-game enemies. I think the only area that should have tough enemies from the start should be Hyrule Castle, and that's because it's the final stage. This made jarring moments as Zora's Domain as my third piece. Enemies were laughably easy to get through. This always confused at me, as we were told we can tackle those V's in any order, but the game heavily pushes you to do the Zoras first, based on just the level they are and how close is the Kakariko Village. There's a minor complaint is you can still power through with enough willpower, but something I wish the game balanced better in the sequel. As mentioned previously, I wish the Divine Beasts posed more of a threat to the world. For most of the sections, all they do is just walk around and not really hurt anyone. Zora's Domain is great because Rua's threat was prominent and directly stated to be dangerous to the world. Then you get Rudania, who's just vibing on the volcano. The only threat he poses is that he launches rocks sometimes, preventing the Gorons from digging valuable rocks. Oh my, what a threat. These beasts killed the champions. They should be more of a threat than a walking house. Additionally, each dungeon is way too short and repetitive in nature, in my opinion. You can do each dungeon in less than 10 minutes, I kid you not, if you know what you're doing. This is laughable when you compare it to other games in the franchise. In previous Zeldas, navigating through dungeons is significant and has a lot of puzzles that make your brain move. In Breath of the Wild, the puzzles can be creative at times, but rather simple and don't really use the mechanics enough. Some do, and do very well, but don't take away from how quick the dungeons are and just how, just right through your mind. Dungeons are a hallmark of Zelda, and each one provides part of the meaningful challenge you need to overcome. I'd rather the sequel either go all in on dungeons, or don't have them all. I don't want to be half-hearted like they are here, but rather be full-on challenges. Then when it comes to champions themselves, I wish we got more time to develop them and their role in this world. These are the greatest warriors the race have produced, but their presence in the world doesn't really match it. Revali and Daruk feel forgettable in their own village. Their impacted roles and characters should not have to be developed through DLC. But I really enjoy what we got with Mipha and Urbosa. I just wish the game just did more with them rather than just simple stereotypes and simple cool cutscenes they got. I want to make this clear though, I am not against the main story of this game. I really enjoy the obstacles you encounter and also the characters in each area. The game also gives a different reason to go through each one due to how powerful the rewards are. I mean, Revali's Gale is so busted, and it's something we'll be using whenever it is up. I just wish the game gave us more stories and go through rather than material reason. I think the idea of an optional story is great and leads well the whole concept of freedom the game wears on its chest. That's awesome, leads well the idea that you make the story as you go. I just wish that the story did more to highlight the world rather than just highlight just a little bit of it. Your journey through Hyrule is what you remember most of all, not these story parts unfortunately. Now, I may have noticed I refer to the Divine Beasts as the main story of this game. The reason being that as much direct campaign we get in Breath of the Wild, compared to when we compare to other Zelda games at least. Well, I'm about to talk about the 12 memories from a side story that's just there to illustrate the world. These 12 memories are meant to flesh out Link and Zelda, and each one of them explores a part of them and the relationship they had prior to the fall. They tell a story, but it's not as direct as Divine Beasts, which I refer to as a side story. First off, I do enjoy the idea of seeking out Link's lost memories. It's cool to track down these locations and get a quick glimpse of what the world was once like 100 years ago. It's also just a fun side quest to go see the great views of Hyrule, and unlocking the original outfit is really cool. It also fleshes out who Zelda is and the journey she underwent to be the one holding back this big threat. I enjoy each memory shows a different aspect of who she is, and watching how her relationship with Link develops over time. I feel like these stories give us a good reason to care about Zelda and want to save her and push her along this quest. She's a tragic character who, like Link in the current time, is forced to navigate this world with little guidance, with the pressure of Calamity Ganon looming ever closer in the background and each memory haunting her. I'm not going to do an in-depth character analysis of this, but I do enjoy what I saw. I found Zelda's journey to be enjoyable, and does a decent job highlighting the pre-Calamity world. My only gripe is just how weird it can get, and kind of needs to show more than tell. I wish we got to see more of the Calamity itself, as a few cutscenes we do see near the end are really gripping. We would have had so much more weight to all the ruins we explore if we saw them being ravaged in the past. Like if we had a scene in Hyrule Castle Town of the Guardians killing everybody and destroying Link. Or maybe a bit more of that big battle near the big ruins we saw. I think that could have been a really good job, making these memories feel more substantial at least. I do want to make this clear again. I did not include any story for any DLC or any of the side games. I want to review just the pure base package that we had back in 2017. Maybe a DLC fleshes out more of the story or develops the champions a bit better, but that's something I'd rather keep separate for now. Maybe someday we could revisit again, as there are parts I do really enjoy from that, but that is not the discussion today. I want to make this point again that it's so crucial when it comes to the Breath of the Wild experience. The story we are given here is purely optional and does not even need to be interacted with in order to enjoy this game. The only story you need is Calamity Ganon's going to destroy the world, so you need to go stop him and save Zelda. The best story I feel like we get in this game is walking through the ruins and wondering what happened here, or being reminded of disasters that happened 100 years ago. Like that first scene we get off the plateau, you usually land right in that destroyed town. You're just like, dang, what happened? And also walking through Hyrule Castle the first time is just terrifying. Then gets you to think of what this place is like in its prime. And walking through the castle town, seeing the Guardians and all that goo everywhere. It's just, I think that's the real story of Breath of the Wild. The real story is the gameplay and the world and how we interact with it. I remember most fondly of this game finding a really obscure secret or killing my first Guardian or being knocked off a cliff and go flying. The journey you take in through this world is the real story, and the reason we all fell in love with Hyrule. While I admire the story does not take the focus away from the real draw of the game, I just wish we got more in the overall package than we did. I feel like the potential for a gripping and more tragic backstory to this ruined world is there, but it's not really developed well enough. So you did all the divine beasts, can shield bash like a god, got the Master Sword, and have more than 12 hearts. You then turn your eyes to Hyrule Castle and Calamity Ganon. That moment entering the Hyrule Castle in the Castle Town is just breathtaking. You spent so much time traveling around the Hyrule, honing your skills and conquering the land. You're now able to one-shot Guardians, or well, at least able to take care of them in a few minutes. You made it to the final destination, a place crawling with Guardians, Lynels, and Bokoblins who want to see you meet your end. You can barely take a step in this place without seeing a Guardian laser on you ready to send you to the game over screen. It's the ultimate test for you as a player, and I love it. Hyrule Castle is the best dungeon in this game, even though it isn't exactly one. It's kind of like another big plateau, like a big small central area that you can just explore like crazy. It's huge and crawling with new secrets that you can find on any playthrough. Heck, there's even a shrine in the back that blew my mind back in the day. I really enjoy how the path again is not straightforward here with multiple routes to get there. It's so easy to get lost here and end up finding some cool treasure or lore tucked in the corner. My most recent playthrough, I stumbled upon King Rome's journal for the first time, and it blew my mind. And I really enjoyed the context it added to the story that I didn't really have back then. And I really enjoyed the inclusion of these journals, both Zelda and Rome, as they both tell tragic stories that adds to the weight of this place. I could gush for much longer on how much I love this place, but I need to move on to Calamity Ganon himself. I don't know how I feel about this version of Ganon. He's more of a force of nature than a character, unlike other games. He's there to bring ruin and destruction upon Hyrule, as he represents all the Ganons into one creature. His influence over this land is clear when you see the corrupted guardians and monsters running amok. He's more like an obstacle that forces the player to interact with a lot of cool things and learn a lot of things. Kind of like a Godzilla, is the best way I can really describe it. But he's not really technically a direct antagonist. I wish we kind of learned more about his origins though, because it's kind of very vague on we know that he's just all the Ganons, but that's all we know, and that he's evil and super powerful. My guess is we're going to learn more about his origins in the sequel, because with the first trailer, it definitely looks like a sort of Ganondorfish character, but we'll see. But I'm still really excited to learn more. I do really enjoy you can see Ganon everywhere in Hyrule Castle, and no matter where you go in Hyrule, that constant threat looming over you, the view of your goal and the evil that threatens this land is clear to you. He serves his purpose as a force of nature really well, but I kind of wish there was more to the character of the story. I kind of wish we learned more about his powers and what he truly did to Hyrule. I understand we were meant to fill in the blanks by looking around the world, but I still wish the option for more was there, just like the Zelda side story. Enough about that tangent. I really enjoy the first part of the fight with Ganon. It takes all the core combat and boss mechanics in order to beat this guy. You need to be able to dodge perfectly, shield bash perfectly, and shoot your arrows perfectly. If Hyrule Castle tested your exploration skills, then this is the perfect combat test of the game. I really love this fight. The music, Ganon's grotesque design, and his power just all perfectly combine as one glorious battle. I do find it cool that Divine Beasts do significant damage to Ganon at the start, making your overall journey come to fruit a little bit in that amazing blast. When I complain about this, I wish the support was kind of more unique. We were told how necessary their power is in defeating Ganon. We saw firsthand the godly, unique skills of each beast, so it's kind of disappointing that all they do is just fire a big laser. I wish the beast toned down one of Ganon's skills, or gave you a unique attack to use in battle, but what we get is fine, I guess. They always probably want to keep the Ganon fight simple, so the promise of being able to fight Ganon whenever is fulfilled. But even so, it's so cool how he takes aspects from all of the other boss battles he fought in the game. Like, he has the flaming sword of the Fire Ganon. He takes the shoots the lasers just like the Wind Ganon. And he does the big sweeping slashes like the Water Ganon. It's just, oh, I love this fight so much. And I will replay it as much as I can. The best Zelda fights are those cool one-on-one fights, you know, rather than just, sometimes it's fun to fight like the big forces of nature, like your Hinoxes, but dodging and countering blows like that, and watching how he counters all your different moves, it's just, oh, it makes for such a great time. Here's where we get to the bad part of this fight, which is Ganon's second or big beast form. For the second phase, you are thrown onto your horse while Ganon takes on his monstrous form, and you are given the light arrows by Zelda in order to hit those little spots on his back. Fires gigantic lasers at you, and the music is swelling to a crescendo. It's amazing just to be in that moment. But then all that hype is gone when you realize that Ganon kind of just stands there the whole time and doesn't really do anything. His only real attack is a giant laser from the front or accidentally run into you. I took more damage accidentally running into him than from him purposely attacking me. It's kind of an anticlimactic end, to be honest. The final boss of every Zelda game is a peak of the game, even if they can be a bit easy. Think Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, and Ocarina of Time. Yeah, you can argue that these bosses can be trivial, but they actually attacked you, you know? It kind of sucks to have all the tension deflate like that. I hope the sequel can greatly improve on this. But I can't deny that feeling I had being this game again. I just sat there in silence after it. You know, you've heard that feeling being an amazing game that you can just really feel like had an impact on you when all the emotions and build-up are just taken out of you. It's a feeling that only a few games give me, and it's something that will never change for me when it comes to Breath of the Wild though. As much as I rag on about Beast Ganon, I can't deny how easy it is to get swept up in the music in the moment, and going through so much hardship and trials in Hyrule. The beast who caused so much destruction to land is finally slain by your hands, and Hyrule and Zelda are free. And finally, we have reached the end of this video. I know I came out pretty negative near the end, but I need to make this clear. Breath of the Wild to me is still a perfect video game. It's a once-in-a-generation experience that you can feel while playing through the game, and something that we all knew the year and moment it released. There's no other feeling to describe emerging onto Great Plateau for the first time, just saying, wow, and just getting sucked into it. The combat feels perfect, the graphics feel perfect, the world feels perfect. I can rag on the story all day, but it doesn't track much really when it comes to how I really feel about the game. You don't really play Breath of the Wild for the story. You play for the world and gameplay. You play to feel free and just get lost in this magical world of Hyrule. No other game makes you feel as free as this one. This game was monumental back in 2017. The whole world stopped and I felt just stare in amazement at this thing Nintendo made for this amazing console they made. I'm not kidding. I and many other people just bought a Switch just to play Breath of the Wild, even though it was on the Wii U. This is a game that every person interested in video games needs to play before they die. If I could, I would go back and replay it for the first time just to experience that magical feeling. I'll be forever grateful for the memories this game gave me, and I cannot wait for what the sequel holds. I just want to say thank you to anybody who stuck about this long to watch this video. This was such a long process to write, edit, and record. Probably the longest thing I've ever made, so I really appreciate anybody watching, anybody even just looking, commenting, liking, all that jazz. But yeah, it feels so great to get this off my chest, and I'm looking forward to keep doing more videos like this. I think my next one would be love to do Twilight Princess. I think that'd be a great game to look back on, especially one of my favorite games of all time. But yeah, thank you. Watch my other videos, share this if you can, and thank you so much to anybody watching. Appreciate you, and goodbye.